from creating good stuff. And when we look at the statistics, we see that it is possible, because people are spending as much on music, less goes to the middlemen, the record companies, because they're no longer needed, they no longer provide a valuable service. More goes to the people creating the music. Okay. So that's fantastic.
Malte, you were trying to say something.
Yeah, I wanted just to say, because I wasn't really talking about this issue before, that from our perspective, of course, the freedom of internet, the freedom of internet, is probably an issue as important as whatever, the abolition of death penalty or slavery or something like that. So I think that's a long-term kind of fundamental thing, and it's very obvious that this is something which has to be settled over several decades. It's not something which can be settled within a few years after the internet has come into existence. So from our point of view, we should not think that some minor opinion of some legal service or whatever can actually hold up a very fundamental development, which is actually to be observed worldwide and not only in Europe. Let me say that I think that one thing is really important in this whole debate about the internet. The problem of the problem is not really only that you have more and more regulation for the internet, like terrorism, child pornography, piracy, maybe sometimes killer games and so on. The problem is the risk of non-discriminatory use of these kind of regulations to the danger of the SMEs, the content-driven SMEs in the internet themselves, and this problem and this risk cannot be responded otherwise than through the fact that the internet, in its core, stays non-discriminatory, and I think that that is something which shouldn't be underestimated at all in this context. Thank you.
Giancarlo, you are...
So, Ramon, I wanted to say, to bring it back to the title of the whole thing, Strategy for Innovation in Europe. This is an interesting English. Culturally, these debates are very interesting. Let me bring it back to business. If we're talking about tons of companies creating software, I'll give you an example that I'm going through at the moment. In the telecom software, there is a very successful range of patents, a mini portfolio owned by an SME, a European SME. It's in the hottest area of the internet industry, much bigger business, many multiples of anything we are talking in terms of copyright here. And it received no backing, no financial backing, despite enthusiasm by users and publishers and consumers. So it's being driven totally to the US, because unlike most of software companies I meet in Europe and in Italy, who do not bother to patent because of what has been decided a few years ago, this guy patented in the US, so now he can carry on a financial and a business strategy which he will base in the US, only using European markets as end-user markets because of this gap. And like them, I meet thousands and thousands who need education, like we said today, about IP, because education was kind of made marginal. Although if you talk to the EPO, it's a very big difference between not patenting a software and a software that contains innovation, which can be patented in Europe. That's another fine point which most people don't know, certainly not the users, not the thousands of software companies. So careful with the evolution of something very cultural. In terms of business, software is as promising an area in Europe as any other when it comes to inventiveness and genius. It's widespread, it's everywhere, and at the moment we are losing competitiveness because patenting and protection in general is better in the US than it is here.
So I know right now, this afternoon we heard that the focus is initially on getting the European Community patent and the litigation thing. But after that, should we reopen the discussion in terms of what the patentability is? I mean, I'm asking you as a you know, person from the financial sector. Is that what you're arguing?
Without question, I am convinced, because I see what is happening in rich competitors to Europe and new competitors to Europe, like India and China. IP is becoming increasingly a central, a pivotal area in the innovation field. It used to be a legal field, a scientific area. Now it's becoming the area, even though it has some objectors. I mean, not only you. There's lots of people like open or collaborative business. They believe in sharing, although when you go and see who does the sharing and you compare a large multinational to a small SME, you end up seeing that, just like in any other field, at the end it's the large multinational that benefits from the open. So, but that's a long debate. I am saying that IP is becoming increasingly central. It should receive more attention and more incentive to capture more private finance. The European does already a tremendous job in terms of public finance, but it's not bringing the results. So we've got to find new ways where, with private, it will generate the same level of innovation and competitiveness as in the US, irrespective of the level of technology that is in there, because we have so many more SMEs, so many brilliant SMEs. And that can be done if we give it the strength. Today we heard very promising stuff on protection and enforcement. There's lots of interesting and important initiatives. We need the financial guys, including the banks. There's no time to go into that, but the banks obviously should be in the front line. And there are changes afoot that will make it possible for them to come in and change the parameters with finance and economics.
So specifically, what is your point of view on business method patents? I mean, that is something which in the US has taken, you know, a big explosion?
Well, at the end of the day, in this panel here, we have two philosophies that are reasonably well represented, it seems to me. You either choose to give lots of people something, or you choose to reward meritocracy or the genius, whatever you want to call it. I believe that it's a better incentive to remunerate adequately someone who is better as a driver to growth and wealth. I perfectly respect that someone has a different view. I think historically in Europe we've always perceived more of a let's give a little bit to everyone. The results don't seem to pay off. If you talk about public grants, certainly. If we see the way that it is distributed in Europe, it hasn't produced the same level of innovation, especially on the part of the thousands of end users and beneficiaries who are individuals, universities and SMEs. So to strengthen or to educate that IP is a driver to that, rather than being an enemy or to fairness or whatever you want to call it, is a sure way in economic terms. We can discuss about culture in another area. In economic terms, it's a convincing way to have more competitiveness and success. That's all I'm saying. And I think it's beginning to pay dividends, because finally, after many years in which you could only argue, we have facts. We can name things that are happening around the world and in Europe that corroborate that IP can drive success and change the parameter. For example, I don't think many people know that at the moment there are 300 million euros that are invested in funds that only consider IP-based companies.
But
it's a fraction of the US.
You use the word IP for patentable intellectual property, or for?
Well, no, I don't. There's absolutely no reason to limit it to patents. But